Councillor Kevin Easton.
Please be seated. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a long walk tonight. May I ask my chaplain to go and fill out these statements?
Almighty God, all things are made by you and you delight in your creation. At this season of harvest we acknowledge you to be Lord over all things, and we come as stewards of your bounty. Be with the Mayor and all members of the Council, grant them wisdom and understanding and discernment. Grant to each a generosity of spirit, a willingness to serve, and a full measure of patience. And may there be harmony in their deliberations. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen.
First item on the agenda, declarations of the Mayor.
Try to find a seat.
Are there any declarations of interest, please? No? Item number 2, the confirmation of minutes. Last meeting was held on the 28th of July. I will propose those as a correct record.
And I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
We have one point of comment.
Just one check on those minutes, if I may, Mr. Mayor. I'm listed as having declared an interest on account of 2 organisations that I'm involved with. I did actually declare an interest on account of 3 local parish councils. It's also mentioned, I believe, in the minutes.
So you'd like the Oswald Parish Council to be added to the
Say to the list of the organisations that I declared the interest with regard to.
I'm sure that is done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Apart from that, everybody happy? Yes? Please show. Thank you very much. Okay, that has been carried. Mayor's announcements. Last month, a couple of councillors said, you haven't had much to say, have you not had much to do? So whether I should prove that it's just the opposite by speaking for 10 minutes, well, I won't do that, but it certainly has been the most enjoyable few months since we last met on the 28th of July. Excellent gala days, club days, carnivals, and I've just realised just how much is going on in this borough. I think most of you councillors recognise this, but where we would be without all the volunteers who make our borough what it is, I really don't know. But it certainly does come really home to you. You're doing the job that I'm doing on your behalf at the moment. Of course, the weather has been absolutely magnificent. There's Commons with Tom Jones. I mean, the advantages of being mayor is well, something you appreciate on these occasions. But then on the sad side, there's been quite a lot of commemorations with regard to the Second World War. Went to the 70th anniversary of the disaster with the Frettleton school children. But then the Walls Food Fest, Frettleton Horticultural Society. We've been well and fully aware of things. And also in the St Anne's area where the ex-servicemen and people have really been contributing so much, you know, to the World War commemorations. Sadly, I had to attend the funeral of Alfred Jealous, the late Alfred Jealous, and I think everyone has said that the place would not be the same really without him, but he certainly was a character, a great character as one of our councillors. I wonder whether we should, I was just going to say that. Would you like to stand? Thank you, members. Can I conclude by looking forward and encouraging you all to come to a band concert at Mary Methodist Church on the 25th of October, which is in aid of our two charities, that is the RNMI and also the charity side of the YMCA, which really tries to find accommodation and places for young children and give their youths and people to find often their very first address. I will conclude with that. Hope that tells you what an interesting job the Mayor does have. And turn now to item number 4. We mustn't forget the Chief Executive. Any announcements?
No communication this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Item number 5. Questions from members of the council.
There's no questions from members of the council this evening. Questions from members of the public.
Questions from members of the public. Are you going to deal with this one?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first question this evening is from Alan Ashton, who asks that is the council aware that permission is currently being sought for the installation of solar panels in the Farnham countryside. A typical installation occupies 40 to 50 acres in order to be economically viable. The panels are considerably larger than the rooftop ones, and they stand some 7 to 8 feet tall as a permanent feature in the landscape for 25 years or more. Does the Borough Council have a policy on this matter?
Just in case of any ambiguity, Alan Ashton is the husband of Councillor Sue Ashton and not the father of Councillor Tim Ashton. I would like Councillor Felthorpe, please, to respond to this question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borough Local Plan 2005 was adopted prior to the development of large-scale solar facilities and does not contain any policy specific to such forms of development. Policy CL2 of the Emerging Local Plan for 2030 addresses renewable and low-carbon energy generation. This policy seeks to ensure that the benefits that renewable energy generates projects, including large-scale solar facilities, will provide to the wider economy and local community are properly balanced against any potential harm to landscape, local residents, ecology, land resources, including agricultural land, the historic environment, aviation, defence interests and highway safety. As part of the consultation in regard to the Council's preferred option, a number of comments were received and the Council has resolved to incorporate these comments into this policy in a revised preferred option which is currently being prepared. Any application submitted will receive full and proper consideration and will be subject to consultation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Felthorpe. Question number 2 from John Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I I have heard and seen many comments regarding Blackpool Airport being up for sale by the current owners. As this is our local airport, can you please inform me as to what Fylde Council are doing in order to keep the airport operational and serving residents across the Fylde?
Thank you. Can I call upon Councillor Fidler to answer that question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can assure the oath of discretion and all those in the Blackpool Airport catchment area, our council is doing what it can to ensure the airport remains operational. As soon as Balfour Beatty announced that the airport was up for sale, Fylde took the initiative and invited Blackpool, Wyre, Lancashire County Council and members of the Lancashire Enterprise Partnership to see if we could collectively safeguard the airport. However, there is a word of caution. The local authority has limited powers and little resources to provide direct support to private sector organisations in difficulty. The airport has lost significant amounts of money for several years, with the prospect of increased business virtually non-existent. Legislation and regulation restrict local authorities from spending public resources, particularly finance, for supporting or competing with private ventures. Fylde, along with our neighbouring authorities, are working with the owners of the airport to ensure that if passenger jets stop flying from the airport, the runway remains operational as an airfield with private small planes and the helicopter business. Retention of the runway is essential for any prospect of another airline flying passenger jets from the airport, and every effort will be made to promote and support new airline business. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I think that's helpful to everyone. Question number 3 is from Susan Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the last council meeting, the following question was asked. Organisations such as the RSPB, National Trust, etc., have raised concerns regarding the lack of appropriate regulation for onshore fracking. There is also emerging research highlighting health issues to people who live in close proximity to fracking sites, particularly as a result of flaring, which releases radon gas, a carcinogenic substance, and methane gas, greenhouse gas, into the atmosphere. As we live within 300 metres of the proposed fracking site at Preston New Road, where Quadrilla are proposing 2 flares, this will give us great concern. Will Fylde Borough Council ask Lancashire County Council to make green completion mandatory for all phases of the exploration, and press Lancashire County Council and the government to introduce regulations specific to onshore high-volume fracking with regular and independent monitoring of fracking operations to ensure the environment, in respect of neighbouring residents and local wildlife, is not adversely affected. To which the following response was received. Councillor Thomas Threlfall, portfolio holder for Environments and Partnerships, responded that there have been almost 4 years of work undertaken by task and finish groups and shale gas member working groups that have been set up by Fylde Council. The primary objective of both these groups have been to ensure that any shale gas activity would have full regulation, maximum safety compliance, regular independent monitoring and full restoration of the local environment. The next section is highlighted. All concerns that have been highlighted to the Council would be considered when putting together the response as a statutory consultee. Safety and regulation have dominated the agenda, and he had asked that for any shale gas exploration in Fylde, that the regulatory bodies were located in Fylde, on the doorstep of where the activity was taking place. Given that Fylde Borough Council are currently in the process of submitting an objection to Lancashire County Council for the proposed site at Preston New Road, as agreed at the development meeting on 17th of September, please can I have confirmation that they will still be including these concerns in the response should LCC choose to ignore the objections received and grant planning permission.
Just before I invite Councillor Eaves to respond, Councillor Hayhurst has been trying to attract my attention. Is this because you're on the county planning?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm a member of the County Council Development Control Committee, and this is in my division, so I'm going to leave the meeting for 5 minutes whilst the question is answered. Okay.
Councillor Eaves, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can confirm that our council has considered all the concerns that have been raised in putting together the detailed response that has been sent to Lancashire County Council in respect of the shale gas applications. Mr Mayor, regardless of what decision the County Council come to on the applications, this council will always advocate the need for reassurance that there will be full safety, regulation and monitoring procedures in place before any shale gas activity is carried out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Oh, could you ask that? It was a quick 10 minutes. Councillor Oates, you have a notice of motion. Could you present this, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In response to the Policy Development Scrutiny Committee's recent decision not to call in the Cabinet member decision regarding employment bans, a minority of the committee have published a minority report to explain our concerns. We believe that there is a serious risk that the local plan could be found to be based on conclusions that are unsound, and we therefore call for this matter to be addressed in detail via a task and finish group. We propose that the Council, 1, receive the minority report, and 2, request that the Policy and Service Committee establish a task and finish group to investigate in detail the concerns set out in the report, and that Mr Guest, who submitted his critique at the request of the portfolio holder, be invited to become part of that task and finish group, and 3, that a further report be made to the full Council by the Scrutiny Committee. At a meeting in April 2014, Mr Guest was invited by the portfolio holder to submit a paper outlining the concerns of many of Files community groups to what is felt to be an excess allocation of employment land in the preferred options document, so that further discussion could take place with officers to establish the validity of the claims and encourage proper debate of the evidence. Mr Guest produced his paper in May and requested the opportunity to discuss its findings, but unfortunately he was not afforded the courtesy to do so. In August, the LDF steering group were given a summary of Mr Guest's paper, together with the officer's response. We were not allowed to see the full paper, nor its conclusions, so it was impossible for us to consider the underlying logic and reasoning made by Mr Guest. A majority of the LDF group subsequently endorsed the briefing note, but a sizable minority refused to do so and requested that a copy of Mr Guest's full paper be made available to them. The portfolio holder then published a proposed decision in August rejecting Mr Guest's paper and retaining the filed employment land and premises study. A call-in was put in place, and once again Mr Guest's paper was not made available to the committee. When I asked why not, I was told that it would be unfair to send out the paper without the filed employment and premises study. I insisted that it would be ridiculous for a committee to discuss a paper without having sight of it, and the paper was subsequently sent out electronically and as a paper copy. Even so, a member of the committee determining the call-in admitted that she had not read any of the paperwork. The call-in failed by 9 votes to 7. The member who admitted to not having read any of the information voted not to call it in. The reason for our concern in this matter is that we genuinely believe that there are flaws and errors in the employment land policy, which, if not corrected, will render the local plan unsound. These flaws will undoubtedly be rehearsed at the inquiry in public in front of an inspector. As the emerging local plan is about to be reconsulted, we assert that to look at it now would not result in delays to the plan, would not lead to additional costs, and will be resolved one way or the other without embarrassment to the council. I ask you to support this notice of motion, and I do have a seconder. And Mr Mayor, could we deal with each of the points 1, 2 and 3 separately, please?
Is it Councillor Duffy who's seconding this?
I'll just second this and I'll reserve my right to speak later in the debate.
Thank you very much. This is one notice of motion. There are 3 sections to it. What flexibility do we as members have in taking these as 3 separate votes? One, please.
Mr Mayor, you would normally take them as a composite, but as Mayor, if you wanted to take them separately, on that your prerogative, but a notice of motion is usually a composite resolution that you would, as a rule, vote on as well.
The request has come that we deal with these as 3 separate votes. I personally have no objections to doing that. It is sort of very academic. So if that is acceptable, unless people feel that very strongly otherwise.
Mr Mayor, I would prefer, as the monitoring officer has described, our usual procedure is to deal with these things as a whole, rather than dissect it separate. So I would be supporting that we do our traditional way of dealing with that.
Thank you. Councillor
Mr Mayor, I don't see the logic of separating these out and not dealing with them as one notice of motion, because, for instance, the first point is to receive the minority report. It has been disseminated across the council. All councillors have had that. So I don't understand the logic of dealing with that separately. And then what would be the purpose to set up a task and finish group and yet not receive that by the council or in some way receive that? So it doesn't make sense to me logically why we should dissect this and not determine it as one notice of motion.
Anybody else want to give me any advice further on this before I take a decision? Councillor Murphy.
Mr Mayor, I think the reasoning is that this, although this has been sent out to all members of the council, that there is something related that this has been accepted by the council formally, rather than the fact that everybody's received it isn't the point, it's the fact that it is formally accepted by the council.
I'm inclined, therefore, with you that we do agree that it is a minority report and it has been received. I think that does no more than state the facts. So I'm happy to see that go in the minutes if that is your wish. I am inclined to think that items 2 and 3 tend to go very much together. So having dealt with item 1, then I think if we can now deal with the remainder, is that acceptable to everybody? Well then, that's the way forward. Anyone wishes to speak on this, please? Charlie, anyone wish to speak? Councillor Nulty.
I'd expect other people to speak first, but I've always been of the opinion that this study is flawed, and I think it is essential that we look again at this matter and examine at length the claim of historic errors and that more land has been lost from employment than has been taken up. If these assertions are true, and I believe they are, we must reassess the amount of land set aside for employment in the new local plan. We need to know why the 6 submodels predicting less need were rejected. We've already lost far too much greenfield land to developers for housing, and we really must protect our countryside, as we had a resolution many months ago to do, and only release what is absolutely essential. Once a site is identified for even possible use, the land becomes neglected and untidy and taken out of its existing farming use. We have far too many sites dotted around Fylde like this already, Queensway being a prime example. We must act responsibly, and the best way forward, I believe, and many of us believe, is for a task and finish group to thoroughly examine both the employment land and premises study and Mr Guest's report together to identify if there are flaws in it. I do hope that all councillors can see the logic of this and will take this matter seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? No? Sorry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just simply to say, for those councillors that aren't on DM, just to have a basic understanding that, as Councillor Rose has stated at the beginning, this will not incur costs to the council, and we will also not lose time by introducing or by having a task and finish group in place. What we would be doing is ensuring that the correct information is going forward to be included in our local plan. But as I say, just to explain to those members that aren't on DM, the basics being, the more of our countryside that is released to employment land, we know then the knock-on effect is that it weakens us in the situation where we are then advised that we need more housing. And we know that more housing will give this council the new homes bonus. But is that the case? Is that what we should be looking at? Losing our countryside to employment land that, for all the reasons in Mr Guest's article and from the consultants, choosing one of the items out of 7, do we really, really need all this employment land? So I really cannot see a problem in forming a task and finish group. If we're wrong, we're wrong. Fine, everybody holds their hand up. If not, at least we know we're going forward with the correct information.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Thank you, Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mr. A couple of years ago, we had the local LDF steering group at a meeting. Your consultants advised us about infrastructure to advise the local plan. That was BE Group. We spoke about the utilities, we spoke about broadband, but they didn't know about the Preston Westerly bypass. This is something important to this borough. This is the same group as we're talking about tonight. To set up a task and finish group isn't going to cost anything. But what is going to be the cost to this council if we don't? What is going to be the cost to this council if the local plan is found to be unsound and goes through the examinations? That is what every councillor here tonight should be thinking about. Thank you.
Just for the avoidance of doubt, the way you sounded it out, it's almost as if the subcommittee or working group of the local plan steering that you're seeking, or is it more scrutiny?
Yeah, from the scrutiny.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duffy?
Mr. Mayor. I'm really concerned about the way that Mr. Guest's, the points that he you've read all the material and read the answers that were given on behalf of you, then I don't think you could come to any other conclusion than I have, which is that the responses were given in a very offhand manner. There is a lot of material to read to fully understand this topic. Most people haven't probably had the time to read it all. What I would ask is, the same as applies to any vote in full council or any committee or anything, if you don't fully understand the argument, then just abstain. There's nothing wrong with that. If you know what you're talking about, if you understand the arguments, then vote in whichever way you feel is right. But if you don't understand them, don't try and influence something without knowing the facts behind it. I really don't understand why it would appear to me that the council seems intent on having all this employment ban. We're talking about Fylde Borough Council, which is smaller than Blackpool, smaller than Wire, having more than twice the amount of employment land than both of them put together, just purely from a common sense point of view. It just doesn't seem to add up. So let's take a chance to look at it. There's nothing lost. It turns out that the arguments in the minority report are wrong, then so be it, and that's fine, and we can move on from there. I would hate to think that the amount of employment land that's being proposed is there just purely to meet the aspirations of the council, or even worse, that it's there just to push up the number of new homes and increase the amount of new homes bonus that we get, which I realise is important, but it might not come anyway if you listen to what's going on in the news recently. I don't really have any more to say because it's all there in the report, it's all there in the background information. It's very clearly spelled out in the minority report. If you agree with the minority report, vote in favour of the motion. If you've got good reasons not to, then vote against it. And if you don't know well enough, then just abstain and leave it up to the people who actually know what the issues are really about. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nash, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's the third time now I've had to listen to this argument, both the scrutiny and the special scrutiny. And it's about employment, not houses. I was an employment consultant for 25 years. And the one thing I can tell you is you can't predict what's going to happen. I helped to re-employ the whole of Birdseye Walls in Kirby in North Liverpool from a site, and they said that was the end of Kirby, it was going to die. QVC, the shopping channel, now has 10 times the number and is employing 10 times the number that Birdseye Walls did. We had a site that was derelict, Cookson's Bakery, some houses went onto it, the land registry next to it. Danborough are moving in there and creating hundreds of jobs. Ineco has moved from St Anne's to Lytham and has created even more jobs. We have jobs coming into. If we don't have the land, we won't have anywhere for us to attract business. The Conservative Coalition has created 2 million jobs since 2010. 2 million, Mr. Mayor. And we are looking here saying, well, there aren't going to be any more in Fylde. The black cloud's hanging over us. We're going to have fewer and fewer, so let's not use it. I helped a company move from Hounslow to Wakefield, which was dead. And they are now providing 20% of the employment in Wakefield. Now, I'm asked as a member to be disinterested, to look at the balance of arguments. And I'm told there's a Mr. Guest from Wharton, and I've read all the way through Mr. Guest's stuff, but I still haven't the foggiest idea who Mr. Guest is. To me, he might as well be Kevin from Grimsby, because I don't know what his background is, I don't know what his qualifications are, I just know that he's written an awful lot of figures. And when you're short of an argument, fill it with figures. So, I'm also told by this notion of motion, which I find extremely patronising, Mr. Mayor,
that I might not understand stuff about land that DM might understand. Well, I'm sorry, I think I'm intelligent enough to look at the arguments here, and they're trying to baffle us with figures. I find this a shoddy piece of work. It's ill-founded, it's negative, it's repetitive and patronising. I'm personally working with a company called Cyrus Wings. It's an American consortium who are looking at bringing in a manufacturing facility to the airport at Spies Gate, where they will convert passenger planes into cargo planes. That will create 170 jobs. So, the point I made at the beginning is what goes down comes up, what goes round comes around. If we don't have the employment land, then we don't know where to put it. So, I don't think that we should adopt this measure. I don't think we need another task and finish group, and I think we should just get on with the local plan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Tim Ashton. Thanks, Chair. Mr. Mayor. 10 years ago, maybe longer, the Foul Coast was affectionately known as Costa Geriatrica. Now I think that's changed, hopefully for the good. We've now got some younger families, younger people, younger employed people, and changing the balance of the demographics of the Foul Coast. And I'd like to say to my opposition members that we should be shouting from the rooftops that Foul is open for business. We want to attract entrepreneurs who are going to employ people and create jobs and sustain jobs. I don't want to see Foul, Lytham, St Anne's, Kirkham, Westham and all the rural areas as a dormitory where people are living there and travelling to Manchester, Liverpool, Preston and so forth for their jobs. I want to have jobs on the doorstep. You know, to some extent, Mr Mayor, you won't believe it, I agree with Councillor Rose about the employment land study, that the figures are wrong. Very surprised. We haven't got enough employment land in them. We should have more. There's some clear blue water between myself, my colleagues and the opposition over there. We believe in creating jobs, in rewarding successful businessmen and making sure that Foul can be sustained. We're not NIMBYs on this side of the council chamber. We want to see success, and success then breeds success. Let's look at a far more important subject in my mind, Mr Chair, and this is democracy we're looking at. The Policy Development Scrutiny Committee is politically balanced. Let me remind members that there was an election in 2011 and various members of the council were elected to various political parties. And from that political balance, the committees are formed. And what's happened, there's been a committee meeting, the Policy Development Scrutiny Committee, and the committee has voted 9 votes to 7, is my understanding of it, to agree to the proposal. And 7 members have disagreed with that. Those 7 members and their colleagues have decided they're not happy, and they've got this minority report which is brought to full council, the notice of motion, and they want the council to then look at something that the majority of the committee decided to accept. Now clearly, to me, that is wrong. And I'll give you an analogy. It's a bit like having a planning committee meeting where you determine a plan application. 9 members vote for the application, 7 against. The 7 who don't like it decide, oh, we didn't really want that plan application. What we'll do, we'll have notice of motion, bring it to full council, and we'll discuss that plan application over again. The only difference is that the planning committee, the semi-judicial committee, and the policy development scrutiny committee isn't. But the principle is the same. Now you may say, well, you know, 45% of the committee didn't want this decision, therefore, you know, 45% is a good number, so we'll bring it to the council. What about if it was 40%? What if it was 35%? What if it was 30%? Where does it stop? This is the thin end of the wedge. If you agree to this tonight, councillors, you might as well ride a coach and horses through the Constitution. What's the point of having a political control of a council, having political control of a committee, making decisions, and then them being unravelled and gone over again and again?
It reminds me of the committee system which we're going to get in next year after May 2015. I've served under both systems, the committee system and the cabinet system, both in opposition and in control of both. And it reminds me, and some members here remember it, you know, we used to have a committee meeting and we'd say, right, what we'll do, this subject's far too complicated for the committee, we'll set a task and finish group up and they can go and look at it and report back to the committee. So what happens? 4 or 5 members go off, they trundle off, make their deliberations, come back to the next committee meeting and make a decision. We're going to do X. The committee says, oh, no, we don't agree with X, we want Y. So the committee vote, they vote on Y. The committee minutes then go to the full council. About a month later, the full council says, this Tourism Leisure Committee, you know, you voted on Y, we don't like that, we're going to reverse that, we're going to go for X. So the full council votes on it and they go for X. About 6 months later, Budget Committee, we met in February, the Budget Committee looks at it and says, oh, no, we don't want X, we want Y. So they change it again. Then that could be finally changed again at full council when you agree the budget. This is a sign of things to come with the committee system. Let me get warning you, this is what's going to happen, and this is a sign of it. So, there's a decision to be made tonight. Do you want to throw the Constitution out the window? Do you want to attract employers and increase employment? Because the question I'll ask you is, where are my children going to get jobs? At the moment, one's in China, one's in London, and one's in Oxford. I'd much rather they lived around here near me. Where do you want the jobs of the future? I want Stephen Files. Thank you for that.
Councillor Hayhurst, please.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't going to speak until I heard Tim Ashton. He always makes me want to speak because I always know that when Tim Ashton speaks, then to believe the opposite. And if you do that, you obviously made the right decision. 2 points I would like to make, though, in his impassioned speech where he mentioned about the committee system. I would love him to tell us why he voted for the committee system at Lancashire County Council. The other thing which I would like to mention with regard to the committee system is that it was a damn sight better than the system that we've had at this authority, where it has taken us 13 years to sort out the town hall. Only 13 years, that's how quick it has been. So, you know, let's face it, take what Councillor Ashton said with a pinch of salt, because basically he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
I found that very interesting, although it wasn't quite to the item on the agenda.
Absolutely not, no.
I'm glad you agreed. I've taken some time to read the calling request and the policy committee's decision. And what we seem to have lost a little bit maybe is that this was a professional report which we as a council paid experts to come up on our behalf with. And I think that is certainly a material consideration that we should bear in mind. Councillor Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Interesting that you mentioned that we paid for this professional report. And I must remind members that we ignored 6/7 of this professional report and just went with the 1/7 that seemed to suit the agenda that was already in place. Just in response to 1 or 2 of the things that have been said, Councillor Nash gave some good examples of employers moving into and moving around the borough. All the examples he gave were moving into existing brownfield sites, which we haven't got a problem with. We don't have an issue with that at all. Like Councillor Ashton said, he isn't an NIMBY. Well, it's not going to be in his backyard. It's rural file that's at risk here. It's what's left of the green space that we're trying to protect. None of us over here have got an issue with making the best use of the existing employment line that we've already got. And as Councillor Guthrie pointed out, we're talking about requiring more than double what Blackpool and Wire have already got as it is. Nothing in this hangs together. It just doesn't add up. You look at that professional report that the Mayor just mentioned, and most of it doesn't add up to the result that we've come out with here. Also, Councillor Nash made the point about not knowing Mr. Guest. Part of our complaints and all on this is that Mr. Guest hasn't been given a proper hearing. He could have been invited to address these meetings properly. That hasn't happened. So I don't find any foundation in the arguments that are being put forward against. I'm not quite frankly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Eaves, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say that the notice of motion that's before full council this evening that you referred to, I feel really does challenge the professional commission that has been procured by this council to provide the appropriate evidence to support the employment allocations in the local plan. The work has been commissioned from a very well-respected organisation that has a history of successful commissions for a number of local authorities, and has defended their research and methodology at planning meetings. The consultants attended the recent calling meeting and responded in every effort and every challenge that was tabled. As a consequence, the call-in was not accepted. Any alternative, I feel, it is a report commissioned outside the council procurement proceedings and without the input from our planning policy professionals, should be carefully considered, and that is the reason that I will not be voting for this notice of motion this evening. In addition to that, I do feel that any calling, any past and finished group, I do feel it would have an expense for this council. I do feel that it will delay the local plan. I do feel that it could delay the local plan considerably. And I also feel that any delays would therefore continue to open the door to developers to be able to put pressure on this council, especially into rural land or development that this council does not want. And that is why I'll be voting against this notice.
Councillor Clayton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the full scrutiny committee, despite the fact we have the consultants there, Mr. Guest was not given the opportunity to make any comment at that time. And despite that, there was still some doubt at the voting where it went 9-7, which we know. Now, to me, that is introducing doubt. If it had been completely unanimous that the propositions had not been carried, then I would have accepted that. But the fact that it's 9-7, to me, that is too close to call. And in the way I'm looking at this, I'm looking at it in a very common sense approach. And when you look at it, Mr. Mayor, we're not asking for the earthing. We're simply asking for a revisit of something that the minority report people have put together, which clearly shows that there is a need for further examination of it. And if members have read the report and then brought into the attention paragraph 54, and it simply says, if those of us supporting the minority position are right, and there are flaws, he's suggesting that there are flaws, but this is what the point of the task and finish group is, to identify whether those are flaws. And there are flaws in the logic and arguments on employment land, then that will undoubtedly be rehearsed at the public inquiry. We believe it is likely to take less time, trouble and cost, and we've already been made aware that there will be little or no cost to do this, and cost to sort the flaws out now than it will if they have to be resolved in front of an inspector. So I will be supporting the notice of motion, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a common sense approach that we do actually go ahead with this testing for this group. There's nothing to lose here, and it will put it to bed on control. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have any other speakers before I ask Councillor Oates to sum up?
Councillor Becker.
Somebody said that they weren't going to speak until somebody else spoke. Well, that's democracy, isn't it? You sometimes don't feel that there's the need to speak until you hear opposing views and challenging views. So, what I come down to here is I've read the minority report, and I don't disrespect it. That's the first thing I want to say. A lot of work has gone into it. Mr. Guest has put a lot of time and effort into it. I also don't want to question the motives behind the report. There's a lot of information in there. It didn't, however, as somebody suggested before, that there was only one way to go once you'd read the report. I suggest that assumes a lot, presumes a lot, because it basically means fait accompli. Once you read the report, you have to vote one way. I don't agree with that particular view. And although there are some challenging points in there, and there are some criticisms of the methodology, and we've all now become experts in various models that are being used, and some are suspicious of the fact that out of the 7 models, the one that predicts growth and the need for greater capacity is the one that was selected. But I was also at the policy scrutiny meeting, and I heard from Mr. Guest. He was given an opportunity to speak. I heard the exchange of views. We did have a debate, and I did note that earlier on in the minority report, the background information, it was noted that Mr. Guest wanted a debate. We're having a debate now. I know some will argue it's after a decision has been made, but we're having a debate here about whether there is a role for a task and finish group. But really, what this boils down to is we have to ask ourselves whether the report that we've had in front of us provides us with robust evidence. And we've all had our experiences at appeals, etc., when various evidence has been challenged, not always to the positivity of this particular council. Here we have a clear decision to make in terms of where do we place our judgment. There are opposite arguments here and some conflicting data. Do we in fact trust what the portfolio holder is saying, what our planning officers are saying, and what the consultants that were employed by Farnborough Council to do precisely this sort of job because we did not feel that we were in the right place to make those decisions. And it does, I have to say, some would say, why not? Why shouldn't it create a precedent? But we have to be very careful here, because what we're actually doing is saying that we invest more importance in a report that has been placed before us by a group of well-meaning councillors and well-informed councillors, including an awful lot of input by Mr. Guest. And I respect that, I repeat that. Or do we listen to the advice of our professional officers, our portfolio holder, and the consultants that were employed to do this job? The other point that I want to make, in reading this minority report, I've learnt a great deal more about the background information. And it seems to me that, like a lot of models and academic models, they're all flawed to some extent, because actually nobody knows what lies ahead in the future. I would have said 2 or 3 years ago, there would be very little optimism about growth, greater employment, the need perhaps for more employment, because we were in the middle of a very deep and depressing recession. We're in 2014 now. We're in a very different place. This authority, the file, plus the national picture, is a very different one to the picture that we had a few years ago. And the thing I didn't like about the report was that it was almost based on a negative premise. I don't think there's anything wrong. You have to have robust evidence, but there's nothing wrong as well with having aspiration. There's nothing wrong with having vision. And I thought it was almost disrespected and sneered at within the report, unintentionally perhaps. But there's nothing wrong with looking forward and saying to Fylde, and saying to the world outside Fylde, as many of my colleagues have already said, we're on the front foot. If you ever want to consider moving your business, if you ever want to come anywhere, come to Fylde, because the one thing that won't stop you is that there won't be an unavailability of appropriate land. Now, I do understand the connection with the housing argument. I do understand why some people are worried that if you allocate, in their view, too much employment land, you are then reducing the amount of brownfield sites, and therefore actually making it a little bit easier, perhaps, to get planning applications on greenfield sites. And I'm not, again, saying that isn't a factor we have to bear in mind, but actually we also have to bear in mind employment for people in Fylde, for attracting people into Fylde, and whatever the historic trends, we are now in a national growth situation. We could be optimistic, we could be very positive, and we could be using this to say, look at Fylde, we're on the front foot, come and set your businesses up here, because there's going to be space for it. I will be supporting that particular view.
Thank you. Councillor Fiddler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no surprise to members of this council that you're going to get an alternative definition of common sense. Mr. Mayor, recently this council considered a notice of motion that required the DM committee to be renamed the Rubber Stamping Committee. Most of us accepted this was a little mischievous, a little tongue in the cheek, and simply reflected the frustration with the government's planning policy. Mr. Mayor, this evening, the motion before us to set up a task and finish group to report on Fylde employment land need is a different beast. In my opinion, it is totally irresponsible. Irresponsible for three reasons. The first, to await the summary of a task and finish group would obviously delay the local plan considerably and prolong our vulnerability in dealing with countryside applications. Two, the authors of the minority report, a report based entirely on an interpretation of employment land need by a resident of Wharton, Mr. Tony Guest. The authors have in fact preempted the deliberations of any task and finish exercise in that they have already released and dismissed the evidence of the BE consultants and denigrated the professionalism of our planning officers. And this occurred in the call-in session for the scrutiny committee. Finally, the third reason which I deem it to be irresponsible, the local plan inspector at the examination in public stage will be presented with two sets of conflicting evidence. His task is to decide which will deliver the most sound, robust and definitive evidence to allow the plan to be adopted. The inspector will be asked to decide between the evidence presented by our BE consultants, consultants of national acclaim, consultants whose methodology has been accepted by government inspectors in various councils nationally, and consultants whose conclusions are supported by all our planning officers. Or, do they accept the alternative? The interpretation by a resident of Wharton, whose views have been shown to be fundamentally flawed, but still energetically championed by our independent councillors. To get it wrong at that stage will in itself delay the adoption of the local plan by a further 6 to 9 months or even longer. Mr. Mayor, I think it's pertinent to remind Council that this minority report before this evening is not the first to be published by Council Road. Following the publication of the local plan preferred option document, a minority report signed by all the independents indeed challenged most of the planning policy interpretations of Mark Evans and his team of officers. Subsequently, several appeal inspectors accepted officers' interpretations and in doing so dismissed the arguments within the minority report. And I also have to remind colleagues that in the Mulgrave Lane inquiry, those members who steadfastly refused to accept officers' advice were described as irresponsible, which led to substantial costs, and I think we all remember the amounts of money, it was a six-figure figure, well over £100,000, awarded against the council, imposing a financial penalty on every ratepayer in power. Mr. Mayor, I simply emphasise that the independents are frequently on the wrong side of the planning argument. Again, Mr. Mayor, I will briefly describe the events leading to this notice of motion. The BE Group's evidence on the employment land need for the year 2030 was endorsed by the local plan steering group. In the subsequent meeting of the steering group, our officers presented rebuttal evidence against Tony Guest, and this was endorsed by a majority of members of the steering group again. This decision of the steering group and the portfolio holders formed the basis for the scrutiny call-in. Representatives of the BE Group were present at the call-in to explain their rationale and methodology. Since the call-in, the consultants have published rebuttal evidence that demonstrates the flawed nature of Tony Guest's views. Mr. Mayor, because of the exhaustive time in debate and the considerable consumption of officers' time and resources, I am obliged to move that Council moves to the next item on the agenda. I hope I have a second.
We'll take Councillor Ashton first, if you don't mind. In seconds, yes. Right. I am advised, and I've got the rules of procedure here, that whilst I would like to call upon Councillor Rose to sum up here, the motion in front of us leads me to be told by our rules of procedure that the Mayor must immediately put the procedural motion to vote without discussion.
They're too frightened for me to sum up. That's the problem, Mr. Mayor.
I outlined my views and I explained the position. Have I any flexibility?
There's no flexibility because the Constitution says that it must go to the vote.
Mr. Mayor, can we have a recorded vote this evening, please, on any votes that are taking place?
Yes, if 6 people agree with you, there will be a recorded vote then. Then we must now carry out the vote.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, can I clarify, the vote that we're actually is in play now is a decision whether we're going to move to the next item of business. So that's what members are being invited to vote on. And if you could indicate whether you're for, against or abstaining. If the vote fails, then the discussion continues to be in play. If the vote succeeds and it moves on to the next item of business, without any discussion, it is deemed to have fallen. So if I take members through the recorded vote, again you can indicate for, against or whether you're abstaining. Councillor Ackers. For. Councillor Arnott.
For.
Councillor Susan Ashton. Councillor Tim Ashton.
For.
Councillor Buckley. For. Councillor Chad.
Against.
Councillor Chu.
Against.
Councillor Clayton.
Against.
Councillor Collins.
Against.
Councillor Craig Wilson. For. Councillor Cunningham. For. Councillor John Davis.
Against.
Councillor Leonard Davis.
For.
Councillor Donaldson.
For.
Councillor Duffy.
For.
Councillor Eaves.
For.
Councillor Zacherley. Councillor Fiddler.
For.
Councillor Ford.
Against.
Councillor Goodman. Councillor Hardy.
Against.
Councillor Hayhurst.
Against.
Councillor Henshaw, Howard Henshaw.
Against.
Councillor Hotwood.
Against.
Councillor Jakes. Councillor Little. For. Councillor Barbara Nash. For. Councillor Edward Nash.
For.
Councillor Naughty. Against. Councillor Oates. Against. Councillor Pounder.
For.
Councillor Redcliffe.
For.
Councillor Rigby. Councillor Silverwater.
Somebody in the stage.
Councillor
Fiddler.
Councillor Silverwood. Against. Councillor Singleton.
For.
Councillor Speed. Against. Councillor Threlfall.
For.
Councillor Wilder. Mayor.
Abstain, as I normally do on these occasions.
And Deputy Mayor. Against. The closure motion was carried with 22 for, 16 against and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. The next item is the Independent Remuneration Panel on page 14. And the recommendation here is that we appoint Howard Hockenhall, Sir Mary Wilson, with members around the Independent Remuneration Panel. Can I invite one to go first of all?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, we have a vacancy on the Independent Remuneration Panel caused by Reverend Peter Lloyd-Jones moving away, and the proposal is to fill the vacancy with 2 new appointees, as we mentioned, Helen Hockenhall and Mary Wilson, as recommended in the agenda on page 14. I move the recommendation.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? I stand for the seconder. Thank you. I understand I don't have any declaring interest, but I did employ Helen Hockenhall some 20 years ago, and she works as an earning staff for me. So I'm just indicating that to be on the clear side. Anybody wish to speak? All in favour? Please show. That is carried. All those against, please. Carried. Abstentions? Thank you. That is the end of the council